So today we're going to talk about really quickly, Joe Rogan had an interview with Donald Trump and it got like 39 million views or something crazy. And then Donald Trump has been on Andrew Schultz's podcast. He was on the podcast with Lex Freeman and they all got like over 6 million views. He went on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, which got probably like 10 million views. And then they all went, and Trump went to their studios and did it at their facilities. Whatever studio they did, he's been to their studios, right? And Kamala Harris was like, yeah, Joe Rogan, I'll do your podcast. You come to my place. We're only going to do it for 1 hour. And we're going to basically have a bunch of people around and go, you can't talk about this. Don't say this. And Joe Rogan is saying that if you're going to do a podcast with somebody, it's a free-flowing podcast in my studio where he has the best sound system, the best lighting for a podcast, and the best video. So when you look at like what Joe Rogan has done, right, he has the best setup for a podcast. For me, if I was Kamala Harris, I would want the best setup and have the most views. Because if you're going to the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, he gets the most views, the most attention out of any podcast. They say he estimates around 10 million views per podcast. That's with YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to his podcast. And you would assume they would want this on her campaign trail, right? Because look at all these numbers that you're seeing from Donald Trump. It's crazy. So you're telling me over 100 million people have listened to Donald Trump, and they have now listened to his stories that you can hear and go, oh, he isn't the bad guy they're saying he is. He actually has common sense. He actually sounds like a decent guy, because you learn a lot from long-form conversation. You're going to get more out of a conversation with somebody in 3 hours than you will these little snippets that you're getting on like The View, where you get like a 15-minute talking point and then you have to interact with like 8 people, right? It would just be Rogan and her. Just like when you have Trump on these podcasts, it's Trump and the guy who runs the podcast, like the host. It's just them shooting the shit back and forth. They might talk about anything from family to when they were younger to politics to everything, but it's not just one thing. And that's why I think when you listen to like a lot of people on the Joe Rogan podcast, when you heard Joey Diaz back in the day, people started to love Joey Diaz because they started understanding who he was as a character and as a person, and not just hearsay, what like a news organization says or what this person says. They're starting to understand who they are as a person. So overall, do I think it's a missed opportunity that she's not willing to go to Joe Rogan's studio and actually lay down even like an hour and a half or 2 hour podcast? Because when you're saying you have a podcast and you're only allowing the person an hour to do a podcast, that means you're limiting a lot of things that you can talk about. Or when you start getting to an hour, you got to wrap it up and you got to kind of miss out on a lot of the things that might have to be said, because Joe Rogan has done up to 5 hour podcasts, right? And when you're talking to somebody, you want it to be free flowing and an easy podcast, not have questions that are directed at it. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? No, it's not a debate. It's not an interview. It's a conversation. There's a difference between interviewing somebody and having a full-on conversation where you're trying to get to know somebody. Because he said, he told Trump even in the interview, he goes, I just want to get to know her as a person. I just want to know who she is as an individual and not just talking points for campaign trail. I don't want talking points for that, like rambling off questions that she already has answers for. I want to know, hey, how were you when you were a kid? How was it when you were in college? Why did you start politics? And so on and so forth. That makes total sense when it comes to actually podcasting and getting to know somebody. That is why Rogan was like, it's been a missed opportunity. I don't want to go to your location. I want you to come to my location where I can fact check you basically, and I can talk to you one-on-one in the best podcast studio on the planet. videos don't lie. I couldn't show you the video, so I took a screenshot and showed you. They were all saying, oh, he's a friend of the show. Whoopi Goldberg gave him a little kiss and a hug, and saying, yeah. And now, if you type in Trump on The View, you can find The View talking about this, and they're like, yeah, I wasn't excited that Trump was on the show. I was never a fan of his, but the tape doesn't lie. The crowd was going bananas. People were like, this is my friend. That's the funny thing. And they go, and she plays the clip of Joe Rogan saying, hey, remember when you were on The View a few years ago? And she comes out and says, well, that was fake news. I didn't care for him. I didn't like him. But when you watch the evidence, the video doesn't lie that Trump was getting love from The View, not hate. And now they hate on him, but the whole machine hates on him now. But back then, when he was running for president, the machine was loving him. They were like, yeah, Donald Trump, that TV star. And nobody said back then he was racist, he was a bigot, or anything. And again, I don't care who you vote for, if it's Trump, Kamala Harris. I'm just making a fact that people in 2015, they were all for him. Oh my God, he's the best thing. He's going on these talk shows. People are like, yeah, Trump was the man. And now people are like, yeah, we don't want to see this. This is disgusting. Like, what changed? It's because when you spit in the face of somebody and tell somebody on the news all the time, this guy's bad, this guy's bad, this guy's bad, you make up lies and you say crazy stuff about somebody, that is when somebody gets shit on. And then people are like, yeah, he is a bad guy. But people don't do research. That's why when he's doing all these podcasts, you figure out, oh, he's not as bad as they say he is. And with Kamala, nobody knows who she is, besides she always says, I came from a middle-class family. My family busted their ass to make a living. And you're like, okay. Other than that, nobody knows about her policies or anything about anything. So at the end of the day, that's why people are starting to go, oh, Trump isn't that bad. I've heard him on this podcast. I enjoyed his conversation with this guy. And like I said, he's getting probably over 100 million views just through all the podcasts that you've seen on the screen. But there's better podcasts than what was on Joe Rogan. I think he did better podcasts on like Lex Freeman and other things. And sometimes the podcast is just easy to listen to. But again, at the end of the day, make your own mind up. Is he a good guy or is he a bad guy like they say he is? But I think she had a missed opportunity for not going on these podcasts and still doing these CNN news shows that really don't get the views that these podcasts are getting anymore. So as always, it's your boy Trevor, back with another video, baby.